This video is about concentrates on problems 19A and problem 19B of your summer assignment, where you were asked to factor the two expressions x cubed plus 27 and x cubed minus 27, and that's what we're going to look at. Now, if you look at those expressions very carefully, you'll realize there's something rather special about the 27. The 27 is a perfect cube. And in fact, what you're asked to do in problem A is you're asked to actually factor the sum of two cubes. So we're going to look at that, and we're going to do it a little more generally. Instead of 27, I'm going to write y cubed. So I've got the sum of any two cubes. And in fact, the answer to that, which is something you should know, is it can be written as a product of two factors. The first factor is simply x plus y. The second factor is a little more complicated. It's a quadratic factor. Notice that middle term, it's minus xy. The coefficient is -1 in the middle. Okay, so how could I check this result if I so wished? Well, it would be pretty easy to check it. All I would need to do is I would need to take x, multiply all the terms in the second parentheses by x, and then plus, then multiply y times all the terms in the second parentheses. And what would happen is I would get 6 terms out of that, but those 6 terms would actually all simplify to give me back my x cubed plus y cubed if I did that. So I'm not going to bother to check it. You're going to just have to take it from me on faith that that is the result. But when you get a moment, you should probably check it yourself. So I've got x cubed plus y cubed, and the result, the factors are x plus y, a linear factor, and the next one is a quadratic. It's got squares in it, and it looks like that. I'm going to put it in a cloud. You've got to know this result. It's an important result. And let's apply it to our particular example. Our particular example that we had was x cubed plus 27. Now, my advice to students always is to say, if you recognize it as the sum of two cubes, write it as the sum of two cubes. The numbers that are being cubed are x and 3. And the reason I do that is because rather than just memorizing the result in the cloud by rote, just recognize how it is constructed. The first factor is made up just by adding the two things that are being cubed. What was being cubed? X and the 3. And then look and see how the second factor is constructed. How is it constructed? You take the first number that's being cubed and you square it. And that will give you the first term in the second factor. Then I usually actually look at the last term. Let me highlight that one. The last term, this one, the y squared. Where does that come from? Oh, it comes from squaring the second term in the first factor. So what am I going to do? I am going to take my 3 and I'm going to square it. And so I get 3 squared at the end. Okay? So all that's left to do next is to figure out the middle term. How do I get the middle term? That is very easy. The middle term comes from a minus. Notice that middle term is a minus. It's a minus, and I simply multiply the two numbers that were in the first factor. So I'm going to get this, I take the x and I take the 3, I multiply them, and I get 3x in the middle. So here is my final answer. X plus 3 times x squared minus 3x plus 3 squared is 9. Okay, shall we do another example? So that's example 1. Okay, I made rather a mess of the results, so I'm going to write it down one more time. X cubed plus y cubed is equal to x plus y. That's very simple first term. I take the first term, square it. I take the second term in the first factor, I square that. And the middle term is minus. I multiply those two together. So it's going to be minus xy in the middle. That was a plus at the end. Okay? So that is my result that I'm going to use. So let's do another example really fast. The example I'm going to choose is a little trickier. Let's do it a little more challenging. Let's do, for example, 8 p cubed plus, let's go for, 27t to the 6th. Woohoo! All right, that's what I want to factor. And I'll look at that and I go, oh my gosh, those are really dreadful things, until I notice, oh, I have got the cube of what? Oh, the cube of 2p. Because when I cube 2p times 2p times 2p, I get a grand answer of 8p cubed. And this is the cube of 3t squared. Because 3t squared will give me 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. T squared times t squared times t squared will give me t to the 6th. So once I recognize it as a sum of two cubes, it's easy. I take what's being cubed, the 2p and the 3t squared. I add them. There is my first factor. Then what do? I take my 2p, and what do I do with it? I square it. I take my 3t squared and I square that. It's plus 3t squared. Okay? And then what goes in the middle? Well, everything I've done so far has been plus. It's a minus. And how do I construct the middle? I simply take my 2p and my 3t squared, and I multiply them. 2p times 3t squared is what's going to go in there. So it's going to be 6pt squared. That comes from taking 2p times 3t squared. And all that's left, oh, that one had to be squared. I left the square off there. Let me fix that. I said squared, I didn't write it in. So let's tidy this up. 2p plus 3t squared, and it's going to be 4p squared minus 6pt squared plus 9t to the 4th, and that's it. Then the last example, I want to go back to how do we do x cubed minus 27. That's pretty easy. I can write that as x cubed plus negative 3 cubed. Okay, I don't need a new result to memorize. I can use the one I've got there. Because when I have this difference of two cubes, I can always write it as the sum of two cubes where, you know, minus 27 is simply negative 3 all cubed. So I just simply use the result I got before. It is now the sum of two cubes. In the first factor, I write what's being the sum of what's being cubed, x and negative 3, so it's x plus negative 3. To construct the next factor, I take my x, I square it. I take my negative 3 and I square it. What goes in the middle? It's minus the product of what's in the first factor. And what's that going to be? The product of what's in the first factor is negative 3x. So let's look and see what my final answer would be. X minus 3, x squared. Ooh, I get a plus 3x plus a 9, and I am